Hello, welcome to Secret Cornwall. I'm going to show you a watercolour of a lovely beach through an antique window. I'm starting by mixing a purpley sky. I want the brightly coloured sea to be dominant. French ultramarine is easily tinted with Alizarin Crimson. Small area, it's got to be quite delicate, so I'm going to use some clean kitchen roll and just dab it back a little bit. It shouldn't just take your attention because there's going to be a lot more detail here. I'm going to put the beach in, and there's a tiny amount of beach, a long way away, so just a tiny bit of Naples yellow. My next move is to put the rocks on the top of the hills opposite, but leaving room for the grass. So this one's hardly got anything, but there's a little path that goes round, so I've just used homemade grey, which I'll put in the description. When items are a long way away in a picture, you just have to look for a colour and a shape and don't worry about detail. I'm mixing warm and cool colours for the rocks. Going to put in the very dark blue sea, which comes all the way to the swimming platform. I'm using a flat brush, and I've mixed up French ultramarine and a little bit of Viridian. The flat brush enables me to get right up to the beach and the window frame, around the rocks. Going back, dropping little bits of paint in again. Just to give it more of a sea look. I mean, it's all little facets. The sea is not completely smooth, and it's comes to about here. So I just put a little line in there so I don't get carried away. Don't be afraid to change the aspect of the brush if you've got a particularly tight bit. Just go around gently as you can. See, putting the bright colour on has now pushed the sky back. Now very quickly I'm changing to turquoise. White sand, there's no rivers or mud going in, so it's particularly clear. Obviously much shallower there. I can add a little bit of green to this if I need to, because it's not completely one colour. Down the side of the window frame again, and on the other side while I'm doing it. There will be some green showing through because there will be seaweed. Now the seaweed, I use a mixture of Naples yellow and Sap Green, and just gently drop some in. Not too much seaweed, just a little bit. And where the sand's wet, actually looks a little bit purple at the tide line, so I can put some purple in, and again dab the brush and take it back off again so that it's very delicate, because it's just the wet sand really with a tiny bit of water on. Try Naples yellow, but it might be too bright. So just make it very, very wet. Take it through the grass. I've gone along the shoreline again and put a few more details of rocks. It's so far away you really can't see any detail. You can just see different colours. But I'm now going to make sure there's not too much paint on the brush and go over the green again. There's a slightly lighter area here, so I'm going to put some diluted turquoise on. Just obviously the current goes round the rocks that are there. We're using the blue that I used earlier, which was French ultramarine, just tinted a little, just to make it look really punchy. Doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same as the previous shape, because there are marks on the water from the wind, so I'm going to make it a little bit darker, just adding some Paynes grey to it. Dabbing off the brush. And just some normal French ultramarine, not tinted, just to ring the changes here. It just makes it look as though there's some activity there, that the wind's leaving ripples. Sometimes you just can't do these things in one coat of paint. You have to go back again. Get as close as I can to the rocks, although they're not a straight line. Almost a straight line where they join, which must be something to do with the depth of the water or the current. Different colour at the front. Where the sand's wet, it can sometimes look slightly violet. This is a synthetic brush and it's holding too much water at the moment, so I'll put the paint down, dry the brush and then move the paint. And I'll just feather it out a little bit. Now the turquoise, it's not completely turquoise, it's got patches of darker where there's seaweed. What I'm going to do is try and take it slightly into the blue. I'm going to add a little bit of Naples yellow to show that it's sort of halfway to seaweed or sand. Just little bits. Some over here. Just keep going with the sideways strokes. Very dry brush. And if you find that your colours aren't separating well enough, just add a little tiny bit of blue. And it'll make the turquoise show up more again. Deliberately not mixing any more paint, using what's there, because I want harmony between the two. It changes colour right by the beach again, which I think must be seaweed. Although the water is fantastically clear there. You can get day trip from Penzance or Exeter. And I'm just going to add a tiny bit more purple where the sand's just picked up a little bit. My next step is to get the number 8 brush and just put some wet sand in, which I'm using yellow ochre. It's a tiny line. It just helps. I can do that now the purple's dried. Some bits of seaweed, so I'm going to use number 2, and I'm using the rock colours because it's dried, it's gone brown, and it's just washed ashore and just laying in little heaps, not too much but just enough to show it's a real beach. I'll get a wet clean brush and just wriggle it out a little bit. Now the next thing to do is the marron grass, which is the beach grass. So I'm going to use a rigger, longer hairs, and just make a dark green and then tint it with Naples yellow. I've mixed up a dark green using French ultramarine, chrome yellow, some Paynes grey and Viridian, and then I can tint it once it's on, but I'm just going to make a start at the grass. It's a little bit difficult to know exactly where to start, but if you start somewhere in the middle, then you'll get your rhythm of doing it. Now you always paint or draw things the way they grow, so doing it up from the bottom, recharging the brush, which is why I made a big puddle. Some of it's blown over by the wind, so it's not all vertical. And when this first lot's on, I can add some lighter and darker colours, because it is in clumps, so some of them will be more shaded than others. Brush with Naples yellow, and I'm just going to go in between some of them just to give a change of colour. A slight hint of a path going down. Now I'm going to go in with some French ultramarine and chrome yellow. That's quite dark. And just gently do tufts, not everywhere. Keep loading the brush every few strokes. And the same on the other side. Back to the first colour. Then clean the brush off and some raw sienna. Only at the bottoms. If you're worried about getting too close to the window frame, if you just put some kitchen roll there, then you needn't panic so much. You can go in more freely. Now that's got to dry now before I can do much more. Adding the path through the grass that's now dried. Just have to make a suggestion. You don't have to fill every space. And I want to put something in around the edge to separate it from the white window frame. The house that I found this lovely window in, this window is well over 100 years old, perhaps nearer 150, was painted green, but in this case it's nice to have it white because it gives a lead in. So that's the path put in. Now I'm going to get some yellow ochre on the brush and just give a slight suggestion of indentations in the sand. Now the next thing I've got to do is get hold of some very dark paint. So I'm going to use Paynes grey and put the pontoon in, or swimming platform. And these things are made of sections, so take the brush off and then just, because it's so small, I'm going to pull the paint down. I don't want it to leap out, I just want it to be part of what's there. Then in a moment I'll have a look and see what else can go in that place. I've got some rocks here that need to be a little bit darker. I only really left space for them. I'll just put the odd mark on and alternate it with some warm ochre. Now the next stage is the reflections. Windows are facing inwards, so there will be a reflection, and it will be level with what's outside. But there's also net curtains. So to start with, I'm going to put the net curtains in. I've got a flat brush which I've loaded with very weak Paynes grey, and I'm going to start from the top because the curtains are hanging down and just put in some random patterns. Then afterwards, when it's dry, I'll add the sky colour over it, and because these are dark and concentrated, they won't melt off or anything, but the blue will be shining through. So I'm now going to just put in a few squiggles, which I think I'll use a different brush. I must admit, I don't paint net curtains very often. If you're not sure about net curtains, some people paint them in gouache. But a squiggle will do. Such a beautiful view. Right, so that's just a suggestion of the net curtains, and then as they get nearer, there's more squiggles because you can see them at a different angle. So now I'm going to just go with the small brush, not the flat brush. Just take the paint for a walk. And then there's a few, say, squiggly bits. But the idea is that there's slight difference between each pane. You don't necessarily just want to look at the pane. Then I'll make the paint a bit darker. And you could do the same if you think that some of it's a bit dark. Just get a tissue while it's still damp and just pull it back a little bit. Now I've got to let that dry, but I can do the other side, which has got more light shining in on the reference that I sketched. So I will just go in more gently, I think. There's not so much shining through the glass this time. I've got nothing showing in the top one really. I'll just put a few squiggles just to break it up. At a different time of the day you get different level of reflections. And then again further down there's more pattern appearing. I'm just going to pat those back a little bit, and then they are again shining through, and then we've got the real ones at the bottom which are also being hit by sunlight. Paint the reflection nicely. I'm using a size 12 flat brush. Just put the paint down. I don't want it to dominate, so I'm using a bright colour but watering it down. And then I'm just going to allow for the shadow coming through from the window and just put the rest on. If I've got it on the window frame, I can easily take it off with a finger. And the same the other side. Allow for the light and shadow of the window frame, and then take it down. make it a bit brighter. And then the next stage, it'll be the reflection of the water. Whoops. So I'll just put water in. And the same on this side. Now I'll take it up a little bit, which I easy to do afterwards rather than at the beginning, because we want them to sort of fade into each other. And then the turquoise, again watering it down. And that goes all the way to the bottom of this pane. And the grass. That's why it's fun to use a window that opens inwards. So you could easily use a window that's not open. I just thought this was such a lovely window. I should try and use it. And then this is just reflecting in the house, so I'm just going to put a little bit Naples yellow over that. And I want a contrast to lead us in, so I want to put a painted wall. I think I'll do it pink. It just takes away the white paint. This is very diluted Alizarin Crimson. I'm now working my way around, looking to remove some of the pencil lines and put on some dark shadows. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and you eventually get to the Isles of Scilly. It's the most beautiful place.